My name is Danny Martinez, and I need to tell someone about what happened at Millbrook Estates before I lose my nerve completely. 3 weeks ago, I thought the worst thing about being 34 and washing dishes at a chain restaurant was the smell of grease that followed me home every night. I thought rock bottom was explaining to my 8-year-old daughter Sophia why Daddy couldn't afford the school field trip again, why we had to move in with Grandma Rosa after the eviction notice came. I was wrong about rock bottom. There's always deeper to fall. The job listing appeared on Craigslist at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I was doing what I'd been doing every night for weeks, scrolling through job boards until my eyes burned, hoping for anything that paid more than minimum wage. Night security, Millbrook Estates Retirement Community. $28 per hour. Overnight shift 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Must be reliable. Serious inquiries only. $28 an hour. More than double what I was making scraping plates. I applied immediately, not even bothering to research the place. When you're 3 months behind on everything and your kids asking why you look sad all the time, you don't look gift horses in the mouth. The interview was scheduled for the next day at 10 p.m. Weird time, but night shift jobs have weird schedules. Millbrook Estates sat on the outskirts of town, a sprawling complex of low buildings connected by covered walkways. It looked expensive, the kind of place where rich people went to die comfortably. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars scattered under the yellow security lights. I found the main office and knocked. A woman in her 50s opened the door, tall and thin with graying hair pulled back severely. She introduced herself as Helen Marsh, Director of Operations. "Mr. Martinez," she said, looking me up and down. "You came alone?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Come in." The office was standard corporate beige, but something felt off about it. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, and there was a smell I couldn't place. Not unpleasant, exactly, but not right either. Like flowers left too long in water. Helen sat behind her desk and opened a manila folder. "Your application says you have security experience. 2 years in the Army, ma'am. MP duties. And I've worked loss prevention." She nodded, making a note. The position requires someone who can follow instructions precisely. Millbrook Estates operates under specific protocols, especially during night hours. "Are you comfortable with that?" "Absolutely." "Good." She pulled out a thick packet of papers. "These are your duties and regulations. Read them tonight. If you're still interested, be here tomorrow at 10:45 p.m. sharp. Not earlier, not later. The residents require absolute consistency in our security procedures." I took the packet, surprised by its weight. It had to be 40 pages. "What exactly am I securing against?" I asked. Helen's expression didn't change. "Mr. Martinez, Millbrook Estates houses 67 residents, most over 80 years old. They have specific needs. Your job is to ensure those needs are met safely and discreetly. The pay reflects the importance of this responsibility." She handed me a key ring with more keys than seemed necessary. "If you accept the position, these will be yours. Memorize the packet tonight. Every word. There will be no training period." I drove home with the packet burning a hole in my passenger seat. $28 an hour. In 8 hours, I'd make more than I usually earned in 3 days. Sophia could have her field trip money. We could get our own place again. That night, after Sophia was asleep and Rosa was watching her telenovelas, I opened the packet. The first page was standard employment stuff, punch codes, emergency contacts, basic facility layout. But page 2 made my stomach tighten. Millbrook Estates Night Security Protocols. Read completely before first shift. Memorize all procedures. Do not share with anyone. Rule 1, arrive at exactly 10:45 p.m. Enter through the main office. Helen Marsh will brief you and hand over responsibility. She leaves at 11 p.m. sharp. After that, you are the only staff member on duty. Rule 2, your first task each night is to check all common area doors. Use key A7, blue tag. Ensure all doors are locked except those specifically marked with green tape. Never unlock a door marked with red tape. If you find a door that should be locked but isn't, lock it immediately and make a note in the security log. Rule 3, room checks begin at midnight. Use the provided list to verify which residents require nightly observation. Enter quietly, confirm they are in their beds, and mark the checklist. Do not wake residents unless they are not in their designated location. Rule 4. If a resident is not in their room during night check, locate them immediately. Common locations include the garden courtyard, the library, or the main recreation room. Do not check the basement levels alone. If a resident is missing and not in common areas, radio immediately for assistance using code yellow. Rule 5. Some residents experience nighttime confusion and may not recognize you. If a resident becomes agitated or claims you are not who you say you are, show them your identification badge and speak slowly. Use their first name. If they continue to be distressed, do not restrain them. Radio for code blue assistance. Rule 6. The basement levels are off-limits between midnight and 6 a.m. except for emergencies. If you must go to the basement during these hours, carry the silver key, chain attached to radio, and the blessed medallion, in office safe, combination 1847. Never go alone. Rule 7. Kitchen patrol occurs at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and 6 a.m. Ensure all appliances are off, doors are locked, and no food has been left out. Pay special attention to the walk-in freezer. If the freezer door is open, close it immediately and check the interior. If anyone is inside, assist them out and escort them to their room. Do not ask questions about why they were there. Rule 8. If you hear singing between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., locate the source. It will be coming from the east wing. Follow the sound to its origin. If the singing stops before you reach its source, return to your post immediately. Do not search empty rooms in the east wing during this hour. I stopped reading and rubbed my eyes. This was weird, even for a nursing home job, but old people got confused at night. Dementia made them do strange things. $28 an hour was $28 an hour. Rule 9. The sunroom is locked after 10 p.m. for safety reasons. If you see lights on in the sunroom after midnight, do not investigate immediately. Wait 15 minutes. If the lights are still on, approach carefully and observe through the windows before entering. If you see more than 3 figures inside, do not enter. Radio code red and wait for instructions. Rule 10. Medication rounds occur at 3 a.m. for specific residents, see attached list. Use the locked medication cart in Helen's office. Each resident receives their medication in their room. Stay with them until they take it. If a resident refuses medication, note it in the log but do not force compliance. If they become violent about medication, radio code blue. Rule 11. The elevator to the 3rd floor requires special authorization. The 3rd floor button will not illuminate without the gold key. Do not use the gold key unless specifically instructed by Helen Marsh or in case of a code red emergency. Rule 12. If residents gather in groups of 4 or more during night hours, observe from a distance. Do not approach unless they request assistance. Groups larger than 6 residents require immediate reporting via code yellow. Groups larger than 10 require immediate code red protocol. Rule 13. Some residents may claim to be family members of yours or people from your past. They may know details about your life that seem impossible. Do not engage with these claims. Redirect them to present topics, the weather, their comfort, their needs. If they persist, use code blue protocol. Rule 14. The garden courtyard is accessible to residents 24 hours, but if you find more than 5 residents outside after 2 a.m., you must escort them inside one by one. Be gentle but firm. If they resist, inform them that the evening air is too cool and that their families worry. This phrase usually provides compliance. Rule 15. Your shift ends at 7 a.m. when the day staff arrives. Helen Marsh returns at 6:45 a.m. for debriefing. Give her the completed log and all keys. Report any unusual incidents, missing residents, or protocol deviations. Do not discuss your shift with day staff or residents' families. The packet included floor plans, resident photos with names, and medical alert information. Some residents had special notations: night wanderer, gentle redirect needed, medication compliance issues, family contact restricted. Normal nursing home stuff, mostly. But the last page made my hands shake. Additional protocols. If you encounter residents who do not appear on your checklist, do not speak to them. Note their appearance and location in the log. Helen will address during debriefing. If you find the main office door unlocked when you arrive, do not enter. Call Helen immediately and wait in your vehicle. If all residents are accounted for during room checks but you hear voices or movement from empty rooms, complete your rounds normally. Note incidents in log. If you see children in the facility during night hours, do not approach them. Radio code red immediately and wait for instructions. If Helen Marsh does not arrive for debriefing by 7:15 a.m., lock all entrances and call the emergency number provided. Do not leave until replacement staff arrives. Remember, Millbrook Estates serves residents with complex needs. Your discretion and adherence to protocol ensures their safety and dignity. Violation of these protocols may result in immediate termination and legal action. I closed the packet and sat back in the kitchen chair. This was the weirdest job training I'd ever seen, but I'd worked in places with strict procedures before. The Army taught you to follow orders without question. This was just another set of orders. Sophia's school permission slip for the field trip sat on the counter next to her backpack. $50 I didn't have for her to go to the science museum with her class. $28 an hour would change everything. I arrived at Millbrook Estates at 10:44 p.m. the next night. The parking lot was empty except for a silver sedan I assumed belonged to Helen. The building looked different at night, bigger somehow, with more shadows than I remembered. The covered walkways between buildings created dark corridors that the security lights couldn't quite penetrate. Helen met me at the main office door. She looked tired, older than she had the day before. "Mr. Martinez. You read the protocols?" "Yes, ma'am. Every page." "Good. Questions?" I had about 100 questions, but something in her expression warned me not to ask them. "No, ma'am." She handed me a radio, a clipboard with resident check sheets, and a ring of keys that was even heavier than I expected. "Radio is channel 7. If you need to call for assistance, use the codes in the packet. The night staff will respond." "Night staff? I thought I was working alone." "You are the only security staff. The care staff works different areas of the facility." She pulled on her coat. "Stick to your protocols, Mr. Martinez. Complete all checks on schedule. The residents depend on consistency. What if something happens that's not covered in the protocols?" Helen paused at the door. "Nothing will happen that's not covered. Follow the rules exactly as written, and you'll do fine. I'll see you at 6:45 a.m. She left, and I was alone in the Millbrook Estates main office with 67 elderly residents sleeping somewhere in the building around me. The silence was absolute, no traffic sounds, no air conditioning hum, nothing. Even the fluorescent lights seemed quieter than they should be. I checked my watch, 11:15 p.m. Time to start the door checks. Key A7 opened easily into the main corridor. The hallway stretched in both directions, lined with doors marked with room numbers. Most had small nameplates: Margaret Holloway, Robert Chin, Dorothy Vance. The lighting was dimmed for night hours, creating pools of yellow glow separated by stretches of shadow. I started with the common areas. The main recreation room was locked, as it should be. The library door was locked. The dining hall was locked. Every door marked on my checklist was secure, except for 2 marked with green tape: the kitchen service entrance and the door to the garden courtyard. Those were supposed to remain unlocked. The basement access door had red tape across it. Definitely locked, and I wasn't about to test it. By 11:45, I'd completed the door checks without incident. Time to wait for midnight and the resident room checks. I returned to the main office and tried to settle in. The security desk had a small lamp, the resident files, and a thermos of coffee that Helen had left with a note: "You'll need this. H." At exactly midnight, I began the room checks. The first wing housed 12 residents. I moved quietly down the hallway, using my flashlight sparingly to avoid waking anyone. Each room had a small window in the door that allowed me to see inside without entering. Room 101, Margaret Holloway, 83, sleeping peacefully in her bed. Check. Room 102, Robert Chin, 78, also in bed, snoring softly. Check. Room 103, Dorothy Vance, 81, bed empty. I felt my first real spike of anxiety. According to Rule 4, if a resident wasn't in their room, I needed to locate them immediately. I checked the common areas first: the recreation room, the library, the garden courtyard. The courtyard was accessible through glass doors from the main hallway. Outside, I could see benches arranged around a small fountain, with walking paths winding between garden beds. A few solar lights provided minimal illumination. Dorothy Vance sat on a bench near the fountain, wearing a bathrobe and slippers. She looked up as I approached. "Excuse me, Mrs. Vance? I'm Danny, the night security guard. It's pretty chilly out here. Would you like me to walk you back to your room?" She smiled, a sweet grandmotherly expression. "Oh, you're new. What happened to Michael?" "I'm not sure, ma'am. I just started tonight. Should we head inside where it's warmer?" "Michael always let me sit out here until 1 a.m. Said the night air helped with my arthritis." She gestured to the bench beside her. "Sit with me for a moment, dear. Tell me about yourself." I glanced at my watch. 12:20 a.m. The protocol said to redirect residents gently but firmly. "Mrs. Vance, I'd really like to make sure you don't catch cold. Your family would worry if you got sick." The phrase from Rule 14 worked exactly as promised. Dorothy's expression changed immediately, becoming more focused. "Oh, you're right. My daughter does worry too much." She stood up slowly, accepting my arm for support. "Thank you, dear." I escorted her back to room 103, helped her get settled, and continued my rounds. The rest of the first wing was uneventful: 11 more residents, all in their beds. The second wing housed 15 residents. I was moving through the checks methodically when I reached room 217 and stopped cold. The room was supposed to house James Patterson, age 79. But when I looked through the door window, I saw 2 people in the bed. An elderly man and what looked like a much younger woman with long dark hair. I double-checked the room number and my sheet. This was definitely 217, definitely James Patterson's room. But there were 2 people in there, and the second person wasn't on my resident list anywhere. Rule 15 came back to me: if you encounter residents who do not appear on your checklist, do not speak to them. Note their appearance and location in the log. I made the note and continued my rounds, but my hands were shaking now. Who was the woman? A family member staying overnight? But wouldn't that be noted somewhere? By 1:30 a.m., I'd completed all room checks. 59 residents accounted for. 8 others noted as not in resident records but present. All 8 were women, all appeared much younger than the typical Millbrook demographic, and all were sharing rooms with male residents. I returned to the office and tried to make sense of it. Maybe they were family members. Maybe there was a special program I didn't know about. Maybe the paperwork I had was outdated. At 2 a.m., I started kitchen patrol. The kitchen was a large commercial space with industrial appliances, walk-in coolers, and preparation areas. Everything was clean and organized, all appliances off as they should be. I was checking the walk-in freezer when I found it propped open with a wooden spoon. Cold air was pouring out, and I could see my breath in the spillover. I removed the spoon and let the door close, but something made me pause. There had been movement inside, just at the edge of my vision. I opened the door again and peered inside. The freezer was full of the expected supplies: frozen vegetables, prepared meals, industrial containers of ice cream. But in the back corner, I could swear I saw someone crouched behind a shelf. "Hello? Is someone in here?" A thin voice responded from the depths of the freezer. "Cold. So cold." I grabbed my flashlight and stepped inside. Behind the rear shelf, I found an elderly woman in a nightgown, hugging her knees and shivering violently. I didn't recognize her from my resident lists. "Ma'am, let me help you out of here. You're going to freeze." She looked up at me with confused eyes. "Where am I? Why is it so cold?" I helped her to her feet and guided her out of the freezer. She was tiny, probably under 90 pounds, and her skin was ice cold to the touch. I wrapped her in my jacket and tried to figure out what to do. "What's your name?" I asked. I don't remember. I was looking for something. Someone told me to wait here. She wasn't on any of my lists. I had no idea which room she belonged in, or if she even lived at Millbrook. But she was clearly in distress and needed help. I radioed for assistance. "This is security. I have a code yellow situation in the kitchen. Elderly female, appears confused, found in walk-in freezer. The radio crackled back immediately. Copy security. Escort resident to room 312. Third floor. Medication required. Room 312. Third floor. That was the floor that required the gold key, the one I wasn't supposed to access without special authorization. Confirm, am I authorized to access third floor? Authorization granted for code yellow escort. Use gold key. Return to normal duties after escort complete. I found the gold key on my ring, heavier than the others, made of what looked like actual gold. The woman leaned against me as we walked to the elevator, still shivering despite my jacket. "What's your name, dear?" she asked as we waited for the elevator. "Danny. Danny." She repeated it like she was trying to memorize it. "Are you my grandson? You look like my grandson." Rule 13 kicked in. Some residents might claim to be family members or know impossible details about my life. "I'm just the security guard, ma'am. Let's get you somewhere warm." The elevator arrived, and I inserted the gold key. The button for the third floor lit up, a soft golden glow unlike the harsh fluorescent of the other buttons. We rode up in silence. The third floor was different from the others. The hallway was wider, with carpet instead of linoleum. The lighting was warmer, more like a hotel than a nursing home. And it was completely silent, not even the hum of air conditioning or the distant sounds of residents moving in their sleep. Room 312 was at the end of the hall. I used my master key to open it and was surprised by what I found inside. Instead of a typical nursing home room, this looked like a luxury hotel suite. King-sized bed, sitting area with a couch and armchair, private bathroom, even a small kitchenette. "This is beautiful," the woman said, sounding more alert. "Is this really my room?" "That's what they told me," I said, helping her to the bed. "Are you feeling warmer now?" She nodded, handing me back my jacket. "Thank you, Danny. You're very kind. You remind me so much of my grandson." I tucked her in and left her there, locking the door behind me. The whole interaction felt surreal, but I'd followed the protocols exactly. Code yellow, escort to room 312, mission accomplished. Back on the first floor, I completed the 2 a.m. kitchen check and settled in for the quiet hours. According to my schedule, the next major task was medication rounds at 3 a.m., but first I had to listen for singing in the East Wing. At 3:15 a.m., I heard it. A woman's voice, singing something that sounded like a lullaby. The melody was haunting, beautiful in a way that made my chest tighten. It was coming from the East Wing, just as Rule 8 predicted. I followed the sound down the East Wing corridor, past rooms I'd checked earlier. The singing was getting louder, clearer. I could almost make out words, though they weren't in English. Maybe Spanish? Or something older? The voice was coming from room 156. I approached carefully and looked through the door window. Inside, I saw Maria Santos, age 74, sitting up in bed. But she wasn't alone. Around her bed stood 4 other women, the same ones I'd noted as not on resident records. They were all looking at Maria as she sang, swaying slightly in rhythm with the melody. I watched, transfixed. The scene was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The women all looked younger than any other Millbrook resident, but there was something timeless about their faces. They wore white nightgowns that seemed to glow in the dim room lighting. The singing stopped abruptly. All 5 women turned to look directly at me through the door window. I stepped back, heart pounding, and hurried back to the main office. Rule 8 was clear: if the singing stopped before I reached its source, return to my post immediately. I'd found the source, but the singing had stopped when they noticed me watching. Had I broken the rule? Should I have kept watching? Or was I supposed to leave when they looked at me? I made notes in the security log and tried to calm down. 3:30 a.m., time for medication rounds. The medication cart was in Helen's office, locked as expected. Inside were individual pill containers labeled with resident names and room numbers. Most were standard medications: blood pressure pills, diabetes medication, heart medicine. But some had labels I didn't recognize, and a few had no labels at all. I started with the first name on the list, Robert Chin, room 102. He was awake when I knocked, sitting up in bed like he'd been waiting for me. "Evening, Mr. Chen. Time for your medication." He took the pills without question and swallowed them with water from his bedside cup. "Thank you, Danny. See you tomorrow night." How did he know my name? I hadn't introduced myself during the room check, and he'd been asleep then. The medication rounds continued without incident until I reached room 217, James Patterson, the one with the extra woman in his bed. I knocked softly and entered with his medication. Both people were awake, sitting up in bed together. James was exactly as his photo suggested, thin, white-haired, probably late 70s. The woman beside him looked maybe 30, with long black hair and dark eyes that seemed to reflect the dim light. "Good evening, Mr. Patterson. Time for your medication." James smiled. "Thank you, Danny. This is my wife, Carmen." Wife? The resident file said James Patterson was a widower. His wife had died 3 years ago. But the woman beside him looked very much alive, very young, and very real. "Nice to meet you, ma'am," I said, following Rule 13. Don't engage with impossible claims. "Mr. Patterson, here's your medication." Carmen spoke for the first time. "You have a daughter, don't you, Danny? A little girl?" My blood went cold. "I'm sorry. Sophia. She's 8. She wants to go on a field trip, but you can't afford it." Carmen's voice was gentle, sympathetic. "That's why you took this job. For her. There was no way she could know that. No way anyone here could know about Sophia or the field trip or why I needed this job. I'd never mentioned my daughter to Helen, never put family information on my application. "I need to finish my rounds," I said, backing toward the door. "She's proud of you, you know," Carmen continued. "Even when you can't afford things. Even when you feel like you're failing her. She thinks you're the best daddy in the world." I fled the room and didn't stop until I was back in the main office, shaking and trying to catch my breath. Rule 13 was clear: residents might claim to know impossible details about my life. Don't engage. But how could she know about Sophia? How could she know about the field trip? I completed the rest of the medication rounds mechanically, barely speaking to the residents. By 4 a.m., I was back in the office, counting the hours until my shift ended. At 4:15 a.m., I did another kitchen patrol. Everything was normal, appliances off, doors locked, freezer securely closed. But as I was leaving, I heard voices from the dining hall. The dining hall was supposed to be locked and empty. I'd checked it myself during the initial door patrol. But light was seeping under the door, and I could definitely hear conversation inside. I used my master key and opened the door carefully. The dining hall was full of residents. At least 30 people sat at the tables, all of them eating what looked like a full breakfast: eggs, bacon, toast, fruit. The room was warm and bright, filled with the cheerful chatter of people enjoying a meal together. But it was 4:15 in the morning. The kitchen was closed, the lights had been off, the door had been locked. How were 30 residents having breakfast at 4 a.m.? I recognized faces from my room checks, residents who had been asleep in their beds less than an hour ago. They were all dressed in regular clothes instead of nightgowns and pajamas, looking alert and social. "Danny," called out Margaret Holloway from a table near the door. "Come join us. We saved you a seat." Several other residents waved and smiled, inviting me over. The scene looked perfectly normal except for the time and the fact that it was impossible. Rule 12 came to mind. Groups larger than 6 residents require immediate code yellow reporting. Groups larger than 10 require code red. This was definitely larger than 10. I backed out of the dining hall and radioed immediately. "This is security. Code red situation in dining hall. Large resident gathering, request immediate assistance." The radio was silent for a long moment. Then, "Copy security. Situation acknowledged. Do not interfere with resident gathering. Continue normal duties. Don't interfere." There were 30 people having breakfast at 4 a.m. in a supposedly locked room, and I was supposed to ignore it? I locked the dining hall door and continued my rounds, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every shadow looked wrong, every sound seemed significant. When I passed the windows facing the garden courtyard, I could see figures moving outside, residents walking the paths, sitting on benches, some gathered in small groups. At 5 a.m., I was supposed to do another room check, but I dreaded what I might find. How many beds would be empty? How many residents would be somewhere they shouldn't be? The first wing was mostly empty. 12 rooms, 12 empty beds. But I could hear voices from the recreation room, see lights under the library door, catch glimpses of movement in the corridors. The residents were awake. All of them. Moving around the facility like it was the middle of the day instead of the middle of the night. I completed my checklist mechanically, noting which beds were empty and which had extra occupants. The pattern was becoming clear. The elderly male residents were in their rooms with the mysterious younger women, while most of the female residents were up and active throughout the building. At 6 a.m., I started my final kitchen patrol. The dining hall was dark and locked again, as if the breakfast gathering had never happened. The kitchen was clean and quiet. But when I opened the walk-in freezer for the final check, I found it full of residents. Not just one confused elderly person this time. At least a dozen people stood inside the freezer, all of them women, all of them the mysterious younger ones I'd been noting all night. They weren't shivering or showing any signs of distress from the cold. They just stood there quietly, watching me with dark eyes. "Ladies, you need to come out of there. It's not safe." None of them moved or responded. They just kept watching me with those two bright eyes. I started to step into the freezer to help them out, but something made me stop. An instinct, a warning, a certainty that entering that freezer would be a mistake I wouldn't survive. Instead, I closed the door and radioed for help. Code yellow in kitchen. Multiple residents in walk-in freezer, refusing to exit. Copy security. Do not enter freezer. Proceed to office for end-of-shift debriefing. I walked back to the main office on shaking legs. The building around me was alive with activity now, voices in every corridor, lights in every room, the sound of footsteps and conversation and life. But according to my official duties, I was supposed to pretend it was all normal. Helen arrived at exactly 6:45 a.m., looking as composed as always. She took my clipboard and keys without comment, scanning my notes about the night's events. "Busy night," she observed. "Ma'am, I need to ask some questions about the protocols. There were things tonight that didn't seem normal." Helen looked up from my reports. "Define normal, Mr. Martinez." "Residents having breakfast at 4 a.m. People in the freezer who weren't affected by the cold. Women in rooms who aren't on any of my lists but know impossible things about my personal life." Helen nodded calmly. "And did you follow the protocols for each situation?" "Yes, but..." "Then you did your job exactly as required." She closed my report and filed it away. "Millbrook Estates serves residents with complex needs, Mr. Martinez. Some of those needs are medical, some are social, and some are harder to categorize. Your job is not to understand those needs. Your job is to follow the protocols that ensure everyone's safety." "What about the women who aren't on my resident list? Who are they?" Helen studied my face for a long moment. "That's not your concern. What matters is that you followed Rule 15 correctly, you noted their presence, you didn't engage inappropriately, and you reported your observations. Well done." She pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. "Your pay for the night, plus a performance bonus. You handled an unusual first shift very well." I opened the envelope and nearly dropped it. There was over $300 inside, more than my usual weekly take-home from the restaurant. "There's too much here." "Hazard pay," Helen said simply. "Night shift at Millbrook Estates carries additional compensation for dealing with complex situations. Will you be returning tomorrow night?" I thought about Sophia's field trip permission slip sitting on my kitchen counter. I thought about our apartment search, about getting out of Rose's overcrowded house, about having enough money to buy groceries without calculating every dollar. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be here." "Excellent. Same time, same protocols. The residents responded well to you, Mr. Martinez." That's not always the case with new security staff. I left Millbrook Estates as the sun was coming up, driving home through normal morning traffic with an envelope full of cash and a head full of questions I wasn't supposed to ask. That night, I told Sophia she could go on her field trip. The joy on her face made every strange moment at Millbrook seem worth it. But as I got ready for my second shift, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed some kind of threshold. The protocols weren't just job requirements, they were survival instructions. And I was starting to understand that Millbrook Estates wasn't just a retirement community. It was something else entirely. My second night started the same way, arrival at 10:45, briefing with Helen, door checks and resident counts. But I was more prepared this time, more accepting of the impossible things I might encounter. The room checks went smoothly until I reached the second wing. Room 230 was supposed to house Eleanor Price, age 85. But when I looked through the door window, the room was completely empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. No bed, no furniture, no personal belongings. Just a bare room with hardwood floors and blank walls. I double-checked the room number and my sheet. This was definitely 230, definitely Eleanor Price's room according to my records. But it looked like no one had ever lived there. I made a note and continued my rounds. 3 more rooms in the second wing were completely empty in the same way, not vacant, but genuinely empty, as if they'd never been furnished at all. At 1 a.m., I found Dorothy Vance in the garden courtyard again, sitting on the same bench by the fountain. But this time, she wasn't alone. 3 other elderly women sat with her in a perfect circle, all of them facing inward toward something I couldn't see from my position. They were holding hands and speaking in low voices, words I couldn't make out but that seemed to have a rhythm, almost like a chant. "Mrs. Vance?" I called out as I approached. "Ladies, it's getting pretty cold out here." They all turned to look at me at once, and I stopped dead in my tracks. Their eyes were completely white, not cloudy like cataracts, but bright white like fresh snow. And they were all smiling the exact same smile. "Danny," Dorothy said in a voice that didn't sound like hers from the night before. "We've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" "Sit with us," said one of the other women. "Complete the circle." Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. Rule 14, redirect gently but firmly. "Ladies, your families would worry if you caught cold out here. Let's head inside where it's warm." The magic phrase didn't work this time. They just kept staring at me with those impossible white eyes. "Your daughter is beautiful," Dorothy continued. "We've seen her in your dreams. She looks just like her mother." I'd never told anyone at Millbrook about Sophia's mother. Hell, I barely talked about Maria to anyone. She died when Sophia was 2, cancer, quick and brutal. How could these women know what she looked like? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, backing away slowly. "Maria sends her love," said another woman. "She wants you to know you're doing a good job. Raising Sophia alone isn't easy, but you're stronger than you think." That broke something inside me. I turned and ran back into the building, leaving the 4 women sitting in their circle in the garden. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the radio when I called it in. Code yellow in garden courtyard. For residents refusing to come inside. The response came immediately. Copy security. Residents have special evening air privileges. Do not interfere unless they request assistance. Special evening air privileges? That wasn't in any of my protocols. I tried to focus on my regular duties, but everything felt wrong now. The building was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. When I passed windows, I caught glimpses of more residents outside, some walking the paths, others standing in groups, all of them moving with purpose I couldn't understand. At 2:30 a.m., I was doing my kitchen patrol when I heard singing again. But this time it wasn't coming from the east wing. It was coming from directly above me. I looked up at the ceiling and realized the sound was coming from the 3rd floor, the one that required the gold key, the one I wasn't supposed to access without authorization. The singing was different this time. Multiple voices, harmonizing in a language I didn't recognize. It was beautiful and terrifying, and it seemed to be getting louder. I radioed for guidance. "This is security. Hearing unusual sounds from 3rd floor. Request permission to investigate." The radio was silent for a long time. Then, "Permission denied. Continue normal duties." But the singing kept getting louder. It was coming through the ceiling now, vibrating through the walls. I could feel it in my chest, in my bones. And underneath the melody, I could hear other sounds, footsteps, voices, what sounded like furniture being moved around. At 3 a.m., I started medication rounds, but I dreaded every door I had to open. The residents were all awake now, all of them. They sat in their beds waiting for me, and every single one knew my name. "Good evening, Danny," said Robert Chen. "Thank you, Danny," said Margaret Holloway. "How's Sophia doing in school, Danny?" asked James Patterson. That last one made me freeze. "What did you say?" James smiled, and in the dim light his teeth looked too sharp. "Your daughter Sophia. 8 years old, 3rd grade. Mrs. Rodriguez's class. She's struggling with multiplication tables, but she's excellent at reading comprehension." There was no way he could know that. No way anyone could know which teacher Sophia had or how she was doing in specific subjects. I'd never discussed any of that with anyone at Millbrook. "She worries about you, you know," James continued. "She sees how tired you are, how stressed. She asked Rosa if Daddy was sick." "Stop," I whispered. "She wants to help. She's been saving her allowance money, $3.47, to help pay for groceries. She hides it in her sock drawer." That was true. Sophia had been secretly saving her allowance money, and she did hide it in her sock drawer. I'd found it last week when I was putting away her laundry, but I'd never told anyone about it. I backed out of the room without giving James his medication. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall and tried to catch my breath. How could they know these things? How could they know about my life, my daughter, my dead wife? The radio crackled. "Security, report to room 312 immediately. Code blue situation. Room 312. 3rd floor. The room where I'd taken the woman from the freezer the night before. I took the elevator up with the gold key, my heart pounding. The 3rd floor felt different tonight, warmer, more alive. I could hear voices coming from several rooms, conversations, and laughter that sounded almost normal. Room 312 was at the end of the hall, just like before. But when I opened the door, it wasn't the luxury suite I remembered. It was a regular nursing home room, single bed, basic furniture, small bathroom. And sitting on the bed was the same tiny woman I'd rescued from the freezer. But she looked different now. Younger, maybe, or just more solid somehow. Her skin had color instead of the blue-white it had been the night before, and her eyes were bright and alert. "Danny," she said, smiling. "I was hoping you'd come back." "Ma'am, I got a code blue call. Are you having some kind of emergency?" She patted the bed beside her. "Sit with me for a moment. We need to talk. I really should stick to my protocols. The protocols are to keep you safe, Danny. But you're past that now. You've seen too much, learned too much. The protocols can't protect you anymore." I stayed standing by the door, ready to run if necessary. "What do you mean? Millbrook Estates isn't what Helen told you it was." "Yes, we house elderly residents with complex needs. But those needs aren't medical." She stood up, moving more gracefully than any 90-year-old should be able to. "We're not dying here, Danny. We're transitioning." "Transitioning to what?" "To what comes next. The residents you see during the day, the confused, frail elderly people, that's what we were. But at night, we become what we're meant to be. What we've earned the right to be." She moved closer, and I realized she was taller than she'd been before. Still small, but not the tiny, frail woman from the freezer. "The women you've been seeing, the ones not on your lists, those are us. Our true selves. The bodies we wore in life were just shells, costumes we had to wear for a while. But here at Millbrook, we don't have to pretend anymore." "That's impossible." "Is it? You've seen us. You've talked to us. Carmen told you about Sophia, about the field trip money. Dorothy and the others knew about Maria. We know these things because death isn't an ending, Danny. It's a doorway." My throat felt dry. "Are you saying everyone here is dead?" "In the traditional sense, yes. Our earthly bodies gave out, cancer, heart attacks, strokes, old age. But Millbrook Estates is a special place. A place where those who aren't ready to move on can stay for a while, can exist in the space between life and whatever comes after." She was right in front of me now, and I could see that her eyes were the same bright white as the women in the garden. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're one of us now, Danny. The moment you walked through that door, the moment you saw us for what we really are, you became part of Millbrook. There's no going back. I'm not dead. I'm alive. I have a daughter, a life outside this place." "Do you?" She tilted her head. "When was the last time you remember driving home? When was the last time you actually saw Rosa or Sophia?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't. I remembered arriving at Millbrook for my first shift, but everything before that was fuzzy. Like trying to remember a dream after waking up. You had a heart attack, Danny. 3 weeks ago, in the restaurant kitchen. You collapsed while washing dishes, and by the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. Your body is in the morgue at County General, waiting for Sophia to decide about funeral arrangements. No. The word came out as a whisper. No, that's not right. I talked to Sophia yesterday. I gave her the field trip money. You gave her spirit the field trip money. Your love, your desire to provide for her, that crossed over. She'll find a way to go on that trip, even without you. Love like that doesn't die, Danny. It finds a way. The room was spinning. I grabbed the doorframe for support, but my hand passed right through it. I looked down at myself and saw I was becoming translucent, like I was fading away. The first few nights are always the hardest, the woman said gently. The transition between accepting what you were and embracing what you are now. But you're safe here. You're home. I can't be dead. I won't leave Sophia alone. You're not leaving her alone. You're watching over her in a way you never could when you were alive. Death doesn't end love, Danny. It purifies it, makes it stronger. I thought about all the things the residents had known about my life, details that seemed impossible for them to have learned. But if they were all spirits, all people who had crossed over but couldn't let go completely. How long have you been here? I asked. I died in 1987. Car accident on Highway 9. I was supposed to watch my granddaughter graduate high school the next week. I've been at Millbrook ever since, watching over her, then her children, then their children. 40 years of making sure my family is safe and loved. And the others? We all have people we can't leave behind. Children, grandchildren, spouses who need us. Millbrook gives us a place to exist between worlds, to keep loving and protecting the people who matter most. I thought about Sophia, about how scared she must be right now. About Rosa trying to figure out how to tell an 8-year-old that her daddy wasn't coming home. About funeral arrangements and social workers and all the bureaucratic horror that comes after sudden death. Can I see her? Can I help her? Of course. That's what we do here. We help. We watch. We love from a distance. The woman smiled. Helen will explain more tomorrow night. She's been here the longest, died in 1943, but she never had children of her own. She helps the rest of us figure out how to navigate this new existence. Helen's been dead for 80 years. Time works differently here. A night can feel like a lifetime, or a lifetime can pass in what feels like minutes. You'll learn to adjust. I sank down onto the bed, finally accepting what I couldn't change. What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow night, you'll start learning how to use your abilities. How to reach across the veil, how to influence events in the living world, how to send comfort and guidance to the people you love. It's not easy, and it takes practice, but you'll get stronger. And during the day? During the day, you'll be what the living expect to see, an elderly resident of Millbrook Estates, confused and frail. It's a kind of camouflage, a way to hide in plain sight. The day staff are all living people who don't know what this place really is. They see what they expect to see. I thought about the protocols, about all the strange rules that had seemed so bizarre. Now they made perfect sense. They were instructions for dealing with spirits and supernatural phenomena, disguised as ordinary security procedures. The protocols were written to help living people work here safely. You're not the first security guard we've had, and you won't be the last. Some handle the truth better than others. Some adapt and stay. Others. She shrugged. Others find ways to leave. What happened to Michael? The guard before me? Michael couldn't accept what he was seeing. He kept trying to apply logical explanations to supernatural events. Eventually, the strain broke him. He's in a psychiatric facility now, telling anyone who'll listen about the nursing home full of ghosts. No one believes him, of course. I nodded, understanding now why the job paid so much, why Helen had been so particular about following protocols exactly. This wasn't just a security job, it was a test of psychological endurance. Will I ever see Sophia again? Really see her? Yes, but not the way you're hoping. You'll see her in dreams, in moments when the veil between worlds is thin. You'll be able to influence small things, help her find lost toys, whisper the answers to difficult homework problems, make sure she feels loved even when she's sad. It's not the same as being alive, but it's not nothing either. A knock at the door interrupted us. Helen Marsh stepped inside, looking exactly as she had during our living world interactions. "Mr. Martinez," she said formally. "I see you've been briefed on your situation." "Helen, you're handling this better than most." Michael screamed for 3 hours straight when he finally accepted the truth. And Thompson, the guard before him, tried to burn the building down. She sat in the room's single chair. "The fact that you're asking practical questions instead of denying reality suggests you'll adapt well to your new circumstances. How many security guards have there been? Living ones? About one every 2 or 3 years. Most don't last more than a few nights before they quit or have psychological breaks. But we need living intermediaries, people who can interact with the day staff, handle emergencies that require communication with the outside world, manage the paperwork and bureaucracy that keeps this place operating. And dead ones? You're the 7th. The others eventually moved on, their loved ones died, or found peace, or no longer needed their protection. When that happens, spirits like us are free to cross over completely. I thought about Sophia, about how long it might be before she didn't need her daddy anymore. 8 years old now, would I be here until she was 18? 30? Until she had children of her own who might need a grandfather's protection? What if I want to leave? What if I decide I can't handle this? Helen's expression softened slightly. Then you're free to go. You can cross over anytime you choose. But Danny, your daughter is going to need you. She's going to face challenges that you can help her with, even from here. Foster care, adoption procedures, growing up without her father, there's so much you can do to make those transitions easier for her. The thought of Sophia in foster care made my chest ache. Rosa was already in her 70s and dealing with her own health problems. She couldn't raise an 8-year-old, not really. Sophia would end up in the system, bounced between temporary homes, maybe separated from everything familiar. Unless I could find a way to help from here. What kind of things can I do? How much influence do I actually have? More than you might expect, Helen said. We can plant suggestions in people's minds, influence their dreams, manipulate small events to create larger outcomes. For instance, 3 weeks ago, we made sure Sophia's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed how bright and capable she is. Mrs. Rodriguez has been thinking about calling social services to recommend a specific foster family, one we've researched extensively, one that would be perfect for Sophia. You've been watching over her since I died? Since the moment you signed your employment contract. We take care of our own here, Danny. You were one of us from the moment you walked through our doors. I felt something loosen in my chest, not relief exactly, but acceptance. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it wasn't the end of everything either. I could still be Sophia's father, just in a different way. What do I need to do? For now, rest. Tomorrow night, we'll begin your real training. You'll learn to project your consciousness, to influence events in the living world, to send comfort and guidance across the veil. It's exhausting work at first, but you'll develop strength with practice. Helen stood up. There's one more thing, Danny. The protocols aren't just for security guards. They're for anyone living who might stumble across what we really are. If Sophia ever comes here, if she tries to visit the place where her father worked, those protocols will protect her from seeing more than she can handle. Will she come here? Children often do, especially children who've lost parents suddenly. They're drawn to places that hold their loved one's energy. When she does come, she'll see a normal nursing home with normal residents. She won't see us as we really are unless she's ready, unless she needs to. The woman who'd been explaining everything to me, I realized I still didn't know her name, stood up as well. I'm Ruth, by the way. Ruth Hendrickson. I should have introduced myself properly. She smiled. Welcome to Millbrook Estates, Danny. Welcome to your new life. Over the following weeks, I learned to navigate my existence as one of the undead residents of Millbrook Estates. During the day, I was Danny Martinez, age 87, confused and frail, just another elderly resident that the living staff checked on periodically. But at night, I was myself again, or a version of myself, anyway. I learned to project my consciousness across town to Sophia's bedroom, to whisper comfort in her ear when she cried herself to sleep. I learned to influence the social worker assigned to her case, planting suggestions about the perfect foster family. I learned to manipulate small events, making sure Sophia found the $20 bill that fell out of Rosa's purse, ensuring her favorite teacher noticed when she needed extra help with math. It wasn't easy. Reaching across the veil was exhausting, and I could only manage small influences at first. But I got stronger with practice, more skilled at touching the living world without disrupting it too much. The other residents became my family. Carmen, the young woman who'd been with James Patterson, taught me how to enter people's dreams. Dorothy and her circle showed me how to pool our energy for larger influences. Ruth helped me understand the rules that governed our existence, what we could and couldn't do, how to stay hidden from those who weren't ready to see us. And Helen managed it all, coordinating our efforts, making sure we didn't accidentally expose ourselves to the living world, helping new spirits adjust to their circumstances while ensuring the older ones didn't lose sight of why they were still here. 3 months after I died, Sophia was placed with the Rodriguez family, Mrs. Rodriguez, her teacher, and her husband Miguel, who worked as a mechanic and understood what it meant to struggle financially. They had 2 other children, both older than Sophia, and they welcomed her with the kind of love I'd always wanted to provide but never had the resources for. I watched from Millbrook as Sophia settled into her new life. I helped her find her favorite stuffed animal when it got lost in the move. I whispered the answers to her multiplication tables when she was struggling with homework. When she had nightmares about the night Rosa told her I was gone, I sent her dreams of us playing in the park, of all the times I'd told her how proud I was of her. It wasn't the life I'd planned for either of us, but it was something. And maybe, in some ways, it was better. I could protect her now in ways I never could when I was alive. I could ensure she was safe, loved, and given opportunities one could never have afforded. The night shift at Millbrook Estates continued. Helen hired new living security guards when needed, and I helped train them, teaching them to follow the protocols without asking too many questions. Some adapted well and became long-term allies. Others broke under the psychological pressure and had to be managed. But I was home now. Not the home I'd expected, but the home I'd earned. A place where love didn't end, where responsibility didn't cease, where being a father meant something different but no less important. And every night, when Sophia said her prayers and asked God to tell her daddy she loved him, I was there to hear it. That's all I'd ever really wanted, to know my daughter was safe and loved, and that somehow, some way, I was still part of her world. Death hadn't ended my story. It had just moved it to a different chapter. The living world continued to turn, but at Millbrook Estates, we kept watch. We kept loving. We kept protecting the people who mattered most, even from beyond the grave. And that, I realized, was its own kind of life after all.